Okay, so today we are going to be finishing chapter 15 on evolution. After today, we will be all done with it. Now, we're going to go to the Caribbean or Caribbean, however you say it, islands. These are made up of Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. So we're getting closer to the equator, and if you guys can see here, it's all this area right here, kind of slightly north from the Dominican Republic. That's where like Haiti and Punta Cana and places are. But anyway, very warm, very hot climate. All right, nice beach atmosphere for us. But anyway, so what we were studying in the Caribbean islands is an organism called Null Lizards. Now, the Null Lizards, so far from like what we learned about evolution, we had organisms that diverged off and became a bunch of different species, and they had a common ancestor. Now, the Null Lizards is going to be a little bit of a different scenario. So they noticed that the Null Lizards looked different on every island. All that was different was their body shape, and it depended on where they lived at. Some lived in the grass, some lived up on the trees, so obviously they're going to have different body types depending on if they got to climb the trees or if they could just live in the grass. If they lived in the grass, they had shorter legs. If they lived in the trees, they had longer legs so that they could, climb up. So here is some different Null Lizards here. You guys can see they also changed because of the camouflage. So here were the scientists' two hypotheses on what was going on with the Null Lizards. So our first hypothesis that they came up with was that there was some ancestor, and that ancestor for Null Lizards was specialized for living on twigs, and later they went to the different islands and we had some new species come about from that original species. So in other words, hypothesis one is that we had a common ancestor. That common ancestor became extinct, and before it became extinct, it diverged into a bunch of different species on our evolutionary tree. So in other words, we originally had just one species, and that diverged into a bunch of species of Null Lizards. Our second hypothesis is that our twig-dwelling species evolved separate from all the other island Null Lizards. So in other words, they really, I guess we could say they had a common ancestor, but it was way back. All right, it'd be like saying bacteria is a common ancestor to humans. Yeah, sure enough, go far enough back, it would be, but it's no recent thing. That's also saying like every human is related to every other human. Well, yeah, technically, if we all go back to the very first few humans that were here, yeah. But in reality, it's been so long that we're probably not related to those people anymore. So that was hypothesis two. It's pretty much that they are not related at all. So what the scientists did is they looked at the DNA. And last time we went over DNA in our different organisms, and we were able to compare amino acid sequences and say, okay, look, there's zero differences here. That means between the human and the chimpanzee, they're very closely related. But if you remember, we also did humans and rats and humans and yeast, and there was a lot of amino acid differences, so they were very far away. When the scientists looked at the DNA between these two different Null Lizards, the ones that lived up in the trees and the ones that lived on the ground in the grasses, they found that their DNA actually was not very similar at all. So what that told us is that we supported hypothesis number two here, and that hypothesis was the one that stated that they did not have a recent common ancestor, and they're actually not related. So even though they did evolve independent from one another, they were still closely, and I'm going to use this term loosely here, related. Reason being is their adaptations were very similar. So maybe not in the DNA they weren't closely related, but they look the same. Okay. So what this tells us, guys, is that they came from different ancestors, but there was a hole in the environment, or in other words, a place in the environment where we needed this Null Lizard to fill, and it evolved to fill that hole based on what the environment needed. What we call this is Convergent Evolution. This is where different species evolve similar traits. Look at down here. This is a perfect picture of everything going on with Convergent Evolution. So we have a fish, we have a reptile, which that was a dinosaur at one time, and then we have our mammal over here, which well after the dinosaurs, obviously. The shark, it can live underwater. It got gills, okay? The dinosaur, it was a reptile. Not quite sure if it has gills or not. Doesn't really matter. The last one, our dolphin, it's a mammal, so it's going to have to come up out of the water to breathe because it doesn't have gills. So all of these on the evolutionary tree are going to be way far apart from one another. However, look at their body. They all have a dorsal fin on top, okay, of the fish. They all have the side fins. They all have some kind of back flipper. They're all very, very, very similar in their body structures. So even though they don't share a common ancestor, they are very closely related. So let's write that here. And by closely related, guys, I mean their body shape is closely related. So for Convergent Evolution, we have no common ancestor. No common ancestor. But we do have a similar function. And if you remember, this is very close to, when we went over last time, our structures, this is very close to analogous structures. So they have the same exact function, but they do not have a similar internal structure. All right. So that is Convergent Evolution. Again, no common ancestor, but they do have, whatever their adaptations are, they do have a very similar function for them. Okay. Yeah. Look at those teeth, though. Seriously, they got rows and rows. I guess that's why, like a shark, if they get you in there, it's very hard to escape because once you're in those teeth, you're done. Okay. Here's another one, guys. All right, we got bird, mammal, reptile. Okay, they all fly. They all have wings, but they did not come from a common ancestor. Now, the second type of evolution. So we have the first one, which is convergent. Second one is divergent. This is us and monkeys. So divergent evolution is we have right here, anytime you see like a node there, that means that was a species at one time. That's our common ancestor. That species went extinct. That was able to give rise to humans on the one side and monkeys, apes on the other side. That is one species going extinct and diverging into completely different species. So that is divergent evolution. Pretty simple because, I mean, diverge, literally, it's like a fork in the road and you're separating there. So here is a different lizard. And you guys can see in their pads here that they're similar but slightly different. So it all depended on what type of surface these lizards are climbing on to depend on how well they can grip. And some were able to grip better than others, so that's why we had all these different adaptations with the pads. Okay, our next one is called adaptive radiation. So this is going to be going back to our Null Lizards. This is when we have a new population in a new environment. Sometimes it could be an island. Sometimes maybe that environment changed. For instance, like us, let's go back way far. After the Ice Age, obviously the Ice Age was very cold. The environment changed. So we found a bunch of new species coming about to fill the holes in the environment. So what will happen here with adaptive radiation is we are going to have a new population come about in a new or changing environment, And what's going to happen is that species, that population is going to go through a bunch of different divergent evolution processes in order to fill all the empty parts of that environment. So with the Null Lizards, the original one, not the pad one I showed you last time, but the Null Lizards, we had some hole in the environment, something that needed done. So maybe like, the lizards ate flies and stuff like that, and then someone ate the lizards. But whoever was eating the lizards wouldn't eat the flies, so we needed to complete that food chain so that we had all these species surviving. So there was a need for the Null Lizards, or we could say the fly population was just getting super, super high, and flies were overpopulating. So that wouldn't be good either. So this weasel, platypus, beaver-looking guy here gave rise to all of these different organisms here. And you guys can see that obviously if we were to have this guy and go to the mole, that would be pretty close in relation. They look very similar. Look at the cheetah or the elephant. Obviously this would probably happen over many, many, many generations. Many more generations than from this guy going to the mole, just because they are so completely different. All right, next one, artificial selection. This is a process when humans choose who's going to breed and who's not going to breed. So this is humans pretty much playing a higher power on, hey, like you can think of dogs with this. Hey, this species is really cute. We're going to breed it, and humans are going to love it, and we're just going to keep breeding it because it's adorable. All right. Dogs are a really good example of this. So this dog over here, this is a canine dog. This is one of my buddy's dogs, actually. So this dog kind of looks like a German Shepherd, but it's not. It's a Belgian breed of dog that they're actually now using for canines instead of German Shepherds. They're a little lighter in weight, but they're just as strong as a German Shepherd. And I kid you not, one of their reasonings for choosing these dogs for canines is because, get ready for it, they are better skydivers. They stay calmer while skydiving if they need to skydive. I just found that hilarious. But you guys think about it too. We're making all these new breeds of dogs and stuff like that. We're mixing pretty much like everything with poodles and dash hounds and things like that, and pugs. Oh my goodness, the pugs nowadays. But we are choosing what the next generation is going to be like, what genes are passed on. So we are like humans, we are selecting what traits are desirable, but they're not really based on which ones are desirable for the dogs or not. It's just which ones for us look adorable. Okay. With dogs, guys, all these different breeds, it is a bunch of divergent evolution. They analyzed DNA from 654 dog breeds and found that they all shared similarities with wolves, which is kind of interesting. Okay, next one, coevolution. This is when two different organisms evolve in response to each other's influence. So, look at this bird down here with the flower. Do you see how its beak has evolved to have that little arch on it, so that way you can get its beak down into this flower here to go get the nectar down below? What happened was this flower was probably straight up, and this bird probably had a beak that was straight over. But then over time, what happened was the flower started to arch itself. In it arching itself, the bird was like, oh, this isn't good. So one of the birds in a future generation had a little like dip on its nose, and what it was able to do is stick that down into the flower, and it's like, hey, this is great, I can get nectar. And all the other birds wanted that bird, and that gene got passed on. Same thing with the hummingbird up here. We have its beak being very long, so it could get to the nectar way down deep into the flower there. So as the flower pushed its nectar down further in, the bird's beak got longer through generations. All right. So we have been involved in coevolution. If you guys have ever taken like any kind of psyllin, like penicillin and things like that, these are going to be antibiotics that kill disease-causing bacteria. Now, the only problem with this is as we use these and expose the antibiotics to the bad bacteria, that bad bacteria, the ones that are like going to get killed by the antibiotic, they die. But some of them are antibiotic resistant. So those ones, they live, they reproduce, and then the whole population of bacteria actually changes so that all of them now have this antibiotic resistant gene. And this is why we need to make new antibiotics for bacterial diseases so that we can continue to kill this bad bacteria and they don't kill us. All right. So we already talked about flowers. We're good here, guys. And that is the end of the chapter. So make sure, guys, review all these. Especially today, we went through 4 big terms. We went through our 2 different types of evolution, convergent and divergent. We went through adaptive radiation, and we went through a 3rd type of evolution called coevolution. So a good bit today, guys. All right, have a good rest of your day. I'll see you later.